Director Lisa Washington wasn't just attending the National Aviation Security Summit that day at Reagan National Airport. But when federal agents questioned her clearance to enter the briefing, their security review 30 minutes later would become the most shocking moment in Homeland Security history. Director Lisa Washington approached the high-security briefing room at Reagan National Airport's federal facility with the purposeful stride of someone who had spent 16 extraordinary years revolutionizing national aviation security and establishing herself as one of the most accomplished Homeland Security executives in American government. At 48, she had risen from intelligence analyst to Director of Aviation Security for the Department of Homeland Security, overseeing national aviation security policy, threat assessment protocols, and strategic coordination that protected millions of passengers annually across thousands of airports throughout the United States and international aviation facilities. Her credentials included a master's degree in national security studies from Georgetown University, advanced certifications in Homeland Security Management and counterterrorism operations, and expertise that had revolutionized national transportation safety through comprehensive threat assessment systems, innovative security technologies, and strategic federal coordination that set global standards for aviation protection and passenger safety. She had directed national security responses to aviation threats that prevented multiple terrorist incidents, managed federal security budgets exceeding $5 billion annually, and overseen interagency coordination, ensuring aviation security across federal, state, and local jurisdictions throughout the American transportation infrastructure. Today's classified briefing on emerging aviation security threats was part of her routine national security responsibilities, allowing her to coordinate federal response strategies and security protocols without the formal diplomatic procedures that typically accompanied international security summits and classified intelligence operations. Her understated federal attire and security clearance reflected her preference for operational focus rather than emphasizing executive status, allowing her to participate in intelligence discussions and security planning from a practitioner perspective that maintained connection with frontline security operations. Federal Security Agent Robert Martinez, a mid-level government employee with 4 years of federal security experience who had developed assumptions about security clearance based on superficial observations rather than actual classifications or national security credentials, observed Lisa's approach to the classified briefing facility without recognizing the extensive Homeland Security expertise and federal authority that characterized someone who regularly made decisions affecting national aviation security, counterterrorism operations, and federal security policy throughout the Department of Homeland Security and interagency intelligence community. As Lisa presented her classified security credentials and federal identification for access to the National Aviation Security Briefing, Federal Security Agent Martinez immediately demonstrated the type of discriminatory access control that had become problematic in federal security operations, despite comprehensive training programs and explicit government policies promoting professional security procedures for all federal personnel regardless of demographic characteristics or perceived authority assumptions. "Ma'am, I need to verify these security credentials and confirm your authorization for this classified briefing," Martinez stated with obvious suspicion and federal bias while examining Lisa's identification and security clearance with unnecessary scrutiny and discriminatory questioning. "This is a highly classified national security briefing that requires top-secret clearance and specific authorization that I need to verify through additional security channels and federal verification procedures." Lisa immediately recognized the discriminatory nature of Martinez's approach and clear violation of federal security protocols that she had personally helped develop through her extensive involvement in Homeland Security policy and classified operations management. understanding that such treatment represented exactly the type of discriminatory access control that undermined federal security effectiveness and violated equal opportunity principles in government service. Agent Martinez, I have appropriate security clearance and federal authorization for this classified briefing, as indicated by my credentials and departmental identification. Lisa replied with federal composure while observing the systematic discriminatory treatment that violated established security protocols. What specific DHS policy requires additional verification beyond standard classified access procedures for federal executives with appropriate security clearance? Martinez continued his discriminatory approach with additional verification requirements that clearly exceeded standard federal procedures and demonstrated the type of personnel profiling that Lisa had worked extensively to eliminate through comprehensive security training and federal equal opportunity programs throughout Homeland Security operations. Ma'am, this classified briefing involves national security information that requires verification of need-to-know access and appropriate federal authorization, Martinez explained with obvious bias that violated clearly established federal security standards and Homeland Security regulations. Additional verification procedures ensure national security and operational security through appropriate clearance confirmation and federal access protocols. Lisa observed Martinez's escalating discriminatory behavior with growing professional concern and federal awareness of the security failures and government policy violations that such treatment represented, understanding that the situation constituted exactly the type of discriminatory access control that could compromise national security effectiveness and violate federal equal opportunity requirements. Agent Martinez, she said, while reading his federal identification, I believe your verification procedures exceed standard federal security protocols and may constitute discriminatory treatment, Lisa explained with Homeland Security authority and obvious federal knowledge. I'm requesting supervisor intervention and documentation of this access denial for potential federal review and DHS policy evaluation. Her national security knowledge and professional assertion of federal access standards should have immediately alerted any trained federal agent that they were dealing with someone possessing advanced security expertise and familiarity with classified operations and Homeland Security administrative requirements. As Martinez's discriminatory treatment continued with additional access restrictions that clearly violated federal security standards and demonstrated systematic personnel harassment, Lisa persisted in her federal assertions while requesting appropriate supervisor intervention to address the discriminatory practices that characterized the agent's approach to security clearance, verification, and classified access procedures. I am formally requesting standard federal access procedures without discriminatory verification that violates DHS security protocols, Lisa stated with Homeland Security authority and professional expertise that should have established her familiarity with federal operations and national security standards. Your access procedures exceed standard federal protocols and constitute discriminatory treatment that violates federal civil rights regulations and DHS policy guidelines that ensure equal access for all authorized federal personnel. Martinez responded to Lisa's federal assertions with increased obstruction, interpreting her knowledge of Homeland Security standards and federal policies as suspicious behavior rather than recognizing obvious national security expertise and professional knowledge of classified operations requirements. Ma'am, your detailed knowledge of federal security, procedures, and classified access protocols appears concerning and requires additional investigation, Martinez replied with obvious hostility that demonstrated complete misunderstanding about federal personnel rights and national security standards. Enhanced verification procedures are necessary when individuals demonstrate unusual familiarity with security operations that could indicate potential security risks or unauthorized access attempts. Other federal personnel in the security area began witnessing the developing discrimination as Lisa's obviously legitimate classified access was subjected to excessive obstruction and discriminatory treatment that clearly demonstrated bias and violation of federal security standards and constitutional protections for government employees. Among the observing federal employees were several Homeland Security professionals and classified operations specialists who recognized the discriminatory nature of Martinez's access approach and began expressing concern about the obvious DHS policy violations and inappropriate treatment they were witnessing. Federal Security Supervisor Jennifer Chen, who had been monitoring classified access operations from the security office and was becoming increasingly concerned about the discriminatory access control and potential federal policy violations, finally approached the briefing facility with growing awareness of the security standard violations and federal protocol failures that were occurring. Security Agent Martinez, what is the specific security concern that justifies enhanced verification procedures for this federal executive? Chen asked with supervisory authority and growing concern about discriminatory access treatment and federal DHS compliance. Our classified security protocols require standard verification for authorized personnel and professional treatment for all federal employees, regardless of appearance or assumptions about their security clearance or operational access. Martinez attempted to justify his discriminatory treatment with explanations that revealed systematic personnel profiling and clear violation of federal security standards that Lisa's national leadership had helped establish throughout Homeland Security operations and classified access systems. Federal Security Supervisor Chen immediately recognized the discriminatory nature of Martinez's access approach and clear violation of federal standards that prohibited such treatment based on demographic characteristics. She understood that the situation represented exactly the type of discriminatory access control that could result in federal investigations. Security Agent Martinez, these enhanced verification approaches clearly violate our federal standards and appear to constitute discriminatory personnel treatment, Chen stated with supervisory authority. All authorized federal personnel deserve equal treatment under classified security protocols regardless of appearance. Lisa observed the intervention with professional satisfaction while continuing to evaluate federal security operations, understanding that the situation represented a clear example of systematic discriminatory access control. Supervisor Chen, I appreciate your intervention, but this discriminatory treatment represents systematic federal policy violations that require comprehensive documentation, Lisa explained with authority. I will be pursuing appropriate federal channels to ensure that such discriminatory practices are eliminated from classified operations. Chen attempted to address the situation through immediate access recovery while growing increasingly concerned about the implications. Ma'am, I sincerely apologize for the inappropriate verification procedures you have experienced, Chen said with supervisory authority. We will immediately provide your classified access according to standard federal protocols. More federal personnel continued to witness the discrimination while expressing concern about systematic discriminatory access control. Homeland Security consultant David Wilson, who had been observing the situation with growing concern, approached the facility to provide expertise and documentation. Excuse me, I'm a Homeland Security consultant specializing in federal operations, Wilson announced with professional authority. I've witnessed systematic, discriminatory access control that clearly violates federal standards, and I'm prepared to provide testimony regarding these violations. As the discriminatory treatment situation continued with multiple witnesses and clear documentation of federal violations, Lisa maintained her focus while preparing for the federal complaints that would be necessary to address the systematic discrimination. I am documenting these federal security violations for formal complaint filing with the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General, Lisa announced with authority that demonstrated comprehensive understanding of federal administration. This discriminatory treatment represents systematic policy failures that require immediate corrective action and comprehensive agent training. Chen recognized the serious federal implications that the situation represented, understanding that formal complaints could result in significant oversight penalties if not properly addressed. Ma'am, we are committed to addressing these federal policy violations through immediate corrective action and comprehensive review, Chen stated with supervisory authority. Lisa continued her documentation while observing the response and access recovery mechanisms being implemented. Supervisor Chen, while I appreciate the immediate recovery efforts, this situation requires comprehensive federal review and systematic standard enforcement, Lisa explained with expertise. The systematic nature indicates institutional problems that require executive-level intervention. Consultant Wilson continued his documentation while supporting Lisa's assertions and preparing for the complaints that would inevitably result from such clear violations. This discriminatory treatment represents a clear pattern that requires immediate accountability and comprehensive training reform, Wilson announced with authority. I am prepared to provide expert testimony and support appropriate federal action. Federal Operations Administrator Sarah Rodriguez, who had been monitoring the situation and was becoming increasingly concerned about the implications, finally approached the facility with executive authority. Federal Operations Administrator Rodriguez immediately recognized the magnitude of the federal violations and liability that had been created through systematic discriminatory access control. She understood that the situation required immediate executive intervention. I am Sarah Rodriguez, Federal Operations Administrator for this classified facility, she announced with executive authority. I have been monitoring this situation and recognize the serious federal policy violations that have occurred, and I am implementing immediate corrective measures. Lisa observed the executive intervention with professional interest while continuing her documentation and assessment of the response to systematic discrimination. She understood that appropriate accountability required comprehensive reform. Administrator Rodriguez, this discriminatory treatment represents systematic failures in agent training that require comprehensive accountability, Lisa stated with authority. I am preparing formal complaints with the DHS Inspector General to ensure that such discrimination is eliminated. Rodriguez recognized the serious federal implications that formal complaints would create. She understood that immediate corrective action was essential to prevent significant penalties. Ma'am, this federal facility is committed to eliminating discriminatory practices and ensuring equal treatment for all authorized personnel, Rodriguez replied with executive authority. We will conduct immediate investigation and implement comprehensive training to prevent similar violations. Lisa prepared to continue her documentation while accepting the immediate recovery measures being implemented. Administrator Rodriguez, while I appreciate the intervention, this situation will require ongoing oversight and federal compliance monitoring, Lisa explained with expertise. I will be pursuing formal channels for accountability and systematic reform. Consultant Wilson continued his support and documentation while preparing for the complaints that would ensure appropriate accountability. As the situation continued with executive intervention and accountability measures being implemented, Lisa began revealing the depth of her Homeland Security expertise that would soon transform everyone's understanding of her federal authority. Administrator Rodriguez, I want to ensure that you understand the comprehensive federal implications of this discriminatory treatment, Lisa stated with obvious authority that demonstrated advanced knowledge of federal operations. These access violations represent systematic failures in agent training that I have personally worked to prevent through comprehensive security programs. Rodriguez observed Lisa's detailed knowledge with growing recognition that she was dealing with someone whose expertise exceeded typical federal employee knowledge and suggested significant connection to National Security Administration. Ma'am, your comprehensive knowledge indicates extensive professional experience in National Security Administration, Rodriguez replied with executive recognition. Are you perhaps a federal security executive or DHS administrator who has experience with classified operations? Lisa smiled with satisfaction while preparing to reveal the federal authority that would completely transform the situation and demonstrate the magnitude of access failures that had occurred within the system she had helped develop. Administrator Rodriguez, I appreciate your recognition of federal expertise, Lisa replied with growing authority. I believe this situation provides an excellent opportunity for comprehensive review and agent training. Security Agent Martinez, who had been observing the intervention with growing awareness of his failures, finally began to understand the serious implications of his treatment of someone who clearly possessed exceptional knowledge. I'm beginning to realize that I may have made serious mistakes in my procedures, Martinez said, with obvious concern. Lisa maintained her composure while preparing for the revelation that would demonstrate the true scope of failures and institutional problems within the federal system. As Administrator Rodriguez continued to address the discrimination while implementing accountability measures, Lisa began to reveal her actual position within the federal system and the administrative authority that made her one of the most influential DHS executives. Administrator Rodriguez, I think it's important for you to understand that my interest extends beyond personal discrimination, Lisa explained with increasing authority. I have comprehensive administrative responsibility for federal aviation security that makes this treatment particularly concerning. Rodriguez observed Lisa's federal language and institutional knowledge with growing recognition that she was dealing with someone whose authority went far beyond typical knowledge, suggesting significant administrative connection to DHS operations. Ma'am, your federal perspective suggests that you may have administrative experience with DHS operations, Rodriguez replied with executive interest. Are you perhaps a DHS director or federal security executive? Lisa prepared to reveal her actual federal position that would completely transform everyone's understanding of the situation and demonstrate the magnitude of institutional failures that had allowed such treatment to occur within the system she had spent her career developing. Administrator Rodriguez, I appreciate your recognition of expertise, Lisa said with growing authority. I believe this situation demonstrates the critical importance of comprehensive training that ensures appropriate treatment of all personnel. Security Agent Martinez watched the developing discussion with increasing awareness that his discriminatory treatment had been witnessed by someone with significant expertise and potential federal authority. I'm becoming very concerned about the consequences of my actions, Martinez said, with obvious worry. Consultant Wilson observed the dynamics and institutional knowledge that Lisa was demonstrating while recognizing that the situation involved someone with exceptional authority. The moment Lisa revealed her actual identity as Director Lisa Washington for DHS Aviation Security, responsible for overseeing national aviation security policy and strategic coordination that protected millions of passengers annually across thousands of airports throughout the United States. The extraordinary scope of her federal authority became undeniably apparent to everyone involved. Administrator Rodriguez, Security Agent Martinez, and everyone present, Lisa announced with full federal authority. I am Director Lisa Washington for DHS Aviation Security, with comprehensive responsibility for overseeing national aviation security policy and strategic coordination that protects millions of passengers annually through sophisticated counterterrorism systems and advanced threat detection technology. The revelation created immediate recognition among all federal personnel who realized that they had been witnessing discriminatory treatment directed toward the federal executive, whose leadership directly determined aviation security effectiveness throughout the United States. Federal Operations Administrator Rodriguez stood with complete respect as she understood that the discriminatory access control had been witnessed by the director responsible for national aviation security, whose authority directly impacted transportation security standards throughout the entire aviation system. Director Washington, I am profoundly honored and embarrassed by the discriminatory treatment you have experienced, Rodriguez said, with executive respect. Your leadership represents exceptional federal service that ensures aviation safety throughout the United States. Security Agent Martinez realized with complete horror that his discriminatory conduct had been directed toward the director for DHS Aviation Security, understanding that his actions represented career-ending violations of the federal standards that Lisa's leadership had established. Director Washington, I cannot express how sorry I am for my discriminatory treatment and complete failure to recognize your authority, Martinez said, with obvious fear. I understand the devastating consequences of my actions. Lisa maintained her composure while addressing the systematic institutional problems that the incident had revealed. This situation demonstrates that despite comprehensive leadership, we still have systematic problems with access implementation that require immediate attention and comprehensive reform, she explained with federal authority. This is why truth always comes to light, and justice always finds its way. If this story shows you that dignity and respect matter more than assumptions, make sure you subscribe to see more stories where justice prevails. Because when we stand together against discrimination, we make real change happen. Following the extraordinary revelation and undeniable demonstration of how discriminatory practices could undermine federal national security operations and constitutional personnel rights, DHS Aviation Security immediately initiated sweeping reforms to agent training programs, classified access protocols, and discrimination prevention measures that would ensure systematic elimination of discriminatory practices and comprehensive accountability for constitutional violations throughout the federal Homeland Security system and national security operations. Security Agent Martinez was immediately suspended, pending federal investigation, and faced potential termination for his discriminatory conduct and violation of federal security standards that Lisa's national leadership had specifically developed to ensure constitutional access procedures, while all federal agents were required to complete enhanced constitutional rights training and Homeland Security education that emphasized zero tolerance for discriminatory practices, regardless of personnel demographics or perceived security assumptions. The incident became a catalyst for federal government discussions about institutional discrimination and the importance of comprehensive Homeland Security enforcement that extended beyond training programs to include systematic monitoring and accountability measures that would ensure actual compliance with constitutional rights and federal security standards throughout national security operations. Lisa's federal response to the discrimination became a model for effective Homeland Security oversight and national security accountability, as her comprehensive reform recommendations were incorporated into DHS-wide training systems and inspired other federal security agencies to strengthen constitutional compliance and employee accountability programs throughout the federal Homeland Security community. Within weeks of the incident, the federal facility had implemented new monitoring systems and accountability measures that would prevent similar discrimination and ensure appropriate recognition of constitutional rights, regardless of personnel demographics or perceived status, while establishing LISA's DHS division as federal leader in constitutional compliance and discrimination prevention throughout national security operations. The transformation extended beyond individual federal policies to influence broader government conversations about institutional discrimination in Homeland Security and the critical importance of comprehensive constitutional oversight that ensured actual rights protection rather than mere policy development and training programs that failed to eliminate discriminatory practices in federal security operations. Federal organizations and Homeland Security agencies recognized the incident as a powerful example of how discrimination could persist despite constitutional standards and used LISA's experience to develop enhanced accountability measures and monitoring systems that would ensure effective elimination of discriminatory practices through systematic oversight and federal compliance enforcement. LISA's story became an inspiring example of how federal expertise and Homeland Security authority could create positive institutional change while demonstrating the ongoing importance of constitutional vigilance and comprehensive security. Standard enforcement that protected all federal personnel from discriminatory treatment regardless of their position or authority within the federal Homeland Security system and national security community. The lasting impact extended far beyond individual federal operations to influence how government agencies approached constitutional compliance and employee accountability, with LISA's Homeland Security framework becoming a model for effective discrimination prevention and constitutional enforcement that ensured actual protection of personnel rights through systematic monitoring and comprehensive federal accountability measures. The successful constitutional compliance reforms and enhanced monitoring systems served as powerful testimony to the importance of federal oversight and Homeland Security accountability in eliminating discriminatory practices, while LISA's leadership demonstrated how national security expertise and federal authority could be leveraged to create meaningful progress in constitutional protection and equal treatment for all federal personnel in classified accommodations and Homeland Security operations throughout the United States and national security network. But LISA's story is just one example of how federal security expertise meets discriminatory enforcement. Next video. Watch what happens when a Black luxury hotel owner's 25-year secret is revealed during airport accommodation discrimination. When staff question her right to premium service, the most shocking hospitality empire credentials in travel history emerge. You won't believe what happens when business ownership meets service bias. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and turn on notifications for new content. Don't forget to hit the like button if this story moved you, and share your thoughts and opinions about this situation in the comments below.